Date Part 2, she looked me dead in the eye and said, I have a date tonight. I smiled and said, so do I. She didn't see that coming, and just like that, the game changed. Only because I've worn that look myself, it has a weight to it. I didn't know what compelled me to keep talking. Maybe it was the low music, or the way the light hit her face just right. Or maybe it was just that I'd run out of reasons to hold everything in. I'm not even sure if it's forgiveness I'm chasing, I said slowly. Some days it feels more like I'm trying not to drown in the silence, Maggie nodded, folding the cloth in her lap. That's the hardest kind. The kind that doesn't scream. It just sits next to you until it's all you hear. Her words felt like they belonged in the margins of a book. I didn't know I'd been reading. I set the novel down, spine up on the table. We used to talk about everything, me and her, then little by little, it became a game, like every word had to be weighed, every truth calculated. We stopped being honest. Or maybe just stopped being brave. Do you still love her? She asked. I blinked, caught off guard by the directness, but she didn't flinch, didn't backpedal. Maggie wasn't trying to pry. She was just asking the question I'd been avoiding. I think I love the version of her that stopped showing up, I said. And I hate that I waited so long for her to come back. Maggie's gaze didn't waver, she didn't try to fill the silence, she just let it breathe. She told me she had a date, I said after a moment. I think she expected me to break, to lash out. But I didn't. I told her I had one too. Maggie smiled just a little. Did you? No, I said, not really, I just didn't want her to see she could still hit a nerve. We sat there quietly for a few seconds, the jazz humming soft in the background. The world outside moving like it always does, indifferent and uninterrupted. Then Maggie stood, smoothing her apron. Maybe forgiveness isn't about letting her off the hook, she said. Maybe it's about letting go of the version of you that kept waiting at the door. She turned and walked back to the counter, her steps unhurried. I stared at the space she left behind. Something unfamiliar stirring in my chest, not resolution, not peace, but the beginning of room for breath, room for thought. And maybe eventually room for something new. He looked good on paper. That's what Lauren told herself, as she walked toward the restaurant. Heels clicking against the pavement, each step echoing louder than the last. His name was Jackson. Tech consultant, gym membership, owned a condo downtown, sent exactly the kind of text that made a woman feel like she was still wanted. Lauren had picked the place, upscale, but not too flashy. The kind of restaurant with dim lights. And plates that looked like art. She thought it would set the tone, controlled, elegant, above whatever chaos might be unraveling at home. But the moment she sat down across from him, something felt off. Jackson smiled too much, laughed too hard at his own jokes. His eyes didn't settle on hers for long. They kept scanning the room, landing just a beat too long on the hostesses, the waitresses, anyone who walked by in heels. She tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just first date nerves. Maybe she was reading too much into it because of what she left behind at night. But when he leaned in right after the second drink, and called her dangerous, something inside her tightened. It was meant as a compliment clearly, but it landed wrong, like a hand placed where it wasn't invited. I bet your husband doesn't know what he has, he said, swirling the last of his whiskey. Lauren forced a smile. Ex-husband, she lied. He grinned wider. Even better, the conversation kept trying to flirt, to spark. But there was no fire on her side, just the faint smoke of something that didn't feel right. Every time he touched her arm to make a point, she felt her body tense, not because of attraction, but because it all felt so artificial, so opposite of what she actually wanted. She found herself checking her phone more than she should have. Nothing from Ethan, of course. He didn't even ask where she was going. Didn't blink when she mentioned the date. She had come here to provoke a reaction, to feel seen, envied, claimed, but the only person watching her tonight was a man who didn't know her favorite coffee, her quiet laugh. The way she tucked one foot under the other when she sat too long. He didn't know her, and more importantly, she didn't want him to. Midway through dessert, some overly rich thing she'd barely touched, Jackson leaned in closer, his voice dropped, his tone slow. You want to get out of here? She paused. The words floated there, thick in the air. She looked down at her untouched spoon, then back at him. And in that moment, something inside her recoiled. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even judgment, it was clarity. This wasn't what she wanted. Not the attention, not the chase, not the cheap imitation of connection. What she wanted, what she missed, was something real, something grounded. Something like what she used to have before she started pulling at the threads just to see what would unravel. I think I'm going to call it a night, she said, standing. Jackson blinked, surprised. Oh sure, want me to walk you? No, she said gently but firmly. I've got it. She left money on the table, enough to cover her drink, and walked out without another word. Outside, the cold hit harder than she expected. The air felt sharp, unfiltered, like it was trying to cut through her bravado. She wrapped her coat tighter, and started walking fast. She didn't know where Ethan was, didn't even want to know. But something told her, wherever he was, he wasn't having a night like this, and that thought, that cut deeper than anything Jackson could have said. The apartment was dark when she got home. Lauren stepped out of her heels at the door, letting them fall where they landed. The soft thud echoed through the silence like a sigh. She left the coat on, Too chilled to care. The fabric still held the faint sin of overpriced perfume and disappointment. She walked through the living room slowly, as if drifting toward the hallway. Ethan wasn't back yet. She told herself she didn't care. She poured a glass of wine anyway. The clock above the stove ticked louder than usual. She sat on the edge of the couch, phone in her lap, legs crossed tight, like she could hold her composure together with posture alone. For a while, she scrolled. Nothing in particular, notifications, work emails. A group text she hadn't responded to in days. She tapped into Ethan's profile out of instinct. Nothing new, no stories, no photos, just that same quiet account, untouched, and yet. Something felt different, off. She set the phone down, and leaned back, watching the shadows crawl along the ceiling. It was funny. The entire date had felt like a stage. Her lines were rehearsed. Her smile sculpted. Her presence curated to pull a reaction. But the man she truly wanted to reach, hadn't even flinched. She thought maybe he'd be waiting when she got back, angry, cold. Maybe he'd throw a snide comment, ask about her night, try to match her energy. But the apartment stayed quiet. Ethan's absence wasn't loud or dramatic. It was worse. It was calm. A kind of peace that didn't include her. She stood up, and walked to the kitchen, refilling her glass. Her fingers wrapped tight around the stem. As if pressure could anchor her. Every part of her wanted to hear that lock click, to see him walk in, and ask the question she didn't want to answer. Did you go through with it? Even a hint of jealousy would have been a lifeline. Anything that said, you still matter to me. But that door never opened, and it slowly dawned on her. Ethan might never ask, not out of grace, not out of maturity. But because he was done, the realization settled like dust on an unused chair. She stood there in the middle of their quiet kitchen, looking around as if the walls might explain what she'd done. Or why she still thought this game would pull him closer. She glanced at the time again. Still nothing. A flicker of something she didn't want to name crept in. Regret, maybe, or fear. She poured out the rest of the wine down the sink, and stood in the silence, not out of virtue, but because suddenly she couldn't taste it anymore. When she finally crawled into bed, the sheets on his side were still cold, untouched. She stared at the ceiling for a long time.